It's my pleasure to introduce Amy Levine. Her background is interesting. She has an education, a degree in psychology and pre-med. But as probably all of you have experienced, life has a way of happening to you, as well as you thinking that you should be doing what you should do. Life gives you some hints and directions. And after some time of doing math, engineering in a variety of ways in Hollywood, she said, I can write, I can produce, I can do this, I'm creative. And so she began to explore those aspects of herself, and as her bio on the website reflects, she's a producer, and she's produced a number of shows, some of which really do relate to her background, like Dr. Phil or The Doctors and such. But her book, that we did have some copies on the back table. If any of you have picked them up, they cost $15 here. She's selling them at a reduced price here today. So you could write a check for her after the presentation for $15. Or if there aren't enough books, or you're not ready to do that today and you want the book, they're available on her website. And what is on the back table is a workbook that she's devised, which is also something that can be accessed on her website. But the book, that the funeral is just the beginning, was prompted by the loss of her sister in another town, unexpectedly. We all here have spent a lot of time over the last few years with speakers helping us all figure out how we would like to die, doing the appropriate paperwork. And we haven't given much focus or much attention to what happens after the funeral. And so Amy's book is unique and invaluable for all of us. And let's welcome her this morning. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, if I speak like this, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm just going to, since we don't have a clock in here, I'm going to set my clock. Okay. So thank you so much for having me today. This book has been, it's truly a labor of love. It was a very difficult book for me to write. I'm a little emotional, I have to admit. My sister has been gone for a little over 2 years now, and next week is her birthday. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about why I wrote this book. Obviously given the choices, it's not the best or easiest thing to write about. But what happened with my sister was that we were not prepared whatsoever. She died suddenly. We had no idea. My parents were on vacation in another country. I was across the country in Los Angeles. We were in the middle of a busy, crazy season in television, and my sister did not have any paperwork in place. She didn't have a will. She had just moved to a city we had never been to. And so it was extremely difficult for us. We had to figure out how to get her body, to figure out how to clean out her apartment. She had pets. We didn't know anything. We had no resources in this city. So I think that for us it was a slightly more extreme case than a lot of people's. But what I decided was, because we did have such a difficult time with it, that I just thought I wanted to help other people avoid the pain that comes with all of the hassles, like having to talk to people that you shouldn't be talking to, having to argue with companies to close bank accounts. Because obviously in this type of group, I think a lot of people have their directives in place, they have a will in place. And so originally I had written the book for people that were experiencing sudden loss. But as I was writing the book, I realized, and talking with a lot of people, no one knew anything about what to do when somebody dies. Because you can get your own house in order, that's one thing. But then what happens when your loved one dies? What happens when, if it's your sister and she doesn't have her house in order? It's going to fall to you to handle and take care of. So what I wanted to do with this book was I couldn't find any sort of practical guide of, like, how am I supposed to clean out an apartment? What are we supposed to do with the pets? What are we supposed to do with her car? You know, I mean, there are all these things that nobody really talks about, and there are a lot of books on, there are a lot of legal books written by lawyers that address, like, all the, you know, here's how you do probate and all of these things. And I have to tell you, like, when you're grieving, you just can't comprehend that. You know, you can't read a book that's written by a lawyer because they're all about words. And so, and I was trying to address, like, what happens when there's not a will? 65% of Americans at any given time do not have a will. So that becomes a whole other issue. So as I go through this, I also wanted to mention I am not a lawyer. Everything that I did a lot of research on legal issues. And what I tried to do, and this is sort of where my writing skills came into play, was I tried to take very complicated issues and condense it into a paragraph. Like, how do we take probate and explain it in a paragraph? So I did have a lawyer review the book, but I always have to make a disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer. So I always refer people to lawyers. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to start with just a little bit of the introduction from my book. I just thought, I feel like it covers what it is that I want to get into, and then I want to get into some specific areas that I see a lot of, that people tend to make a lot of mistakes and have common misperceptions and common problems that come up because of it. So in my introduction, no one ever wants to think about death. No one wants to talk about it, let alone prepare for it. But the one inevitability in life is death, and sooner or later you will have to deal with the passing of a loved one, a parent, sibling, child, spouse. Life happens and death happens. For most people, arranging the funeral is devastating enough, but the funeral is just the beginning. Often the contents of an entire residence must be evaluated and sorted. Decisions have to be made about what to keep and what to discard. Belongings may have to be shipped to other locations, relegated to storage, donated, or sold at auction. If the residence is a rental, all of this may have to be done immediately. In some instances, a home will have to be sold, which means finding a realtor, appraising the property, and preparing it for the market. Vehicles must be cleaned, returned, shipped, and sold. Pets must be relocated or shipped to a friend or relative, vet certified to fly, or in the worst case scenario, relinquished to a shelter. Accounts must be settled and closed. Depending on the circumstance, an estate may need to be probated, and various legal documents must be drawn up and executed. Life insurance and other benefits must be claimed, taxes filed, and government entities notified. Most people will be thrown into the deep end with very little knowledge of how to finalize their loved one's affairs. As 65% of Americans do not have a will, it is safe to assume that many families will struggle with affairs that are in disarray. If a valid will is in place, the personal representative of the estate will have been named, but that person may not live in that state. The process of finalizing affairs can be complicated, involved, and often difficult for one person to handle alone. When death is sudden or unexpected, relatives often have to navigate a town or city they are unfamiliar with. Making arrangements is even more difficult as they do not have any local references or resources. Even in the best of circumstances, the sheer multitude of tasks is arduous, but to those exhausted by grief, They are daunting and formidable. This book provides step-by-step assistance with everything you need to do when a loved one passes. It offers resources for grief support, emergency travel, funeral and cremation services, an overview of probate, paying taxes, and disposing of property, advice on what papers to bring to a lawyer, cleaning out a residence, claiming benefits, and what to do if someone dies without a will. So with that said, first of all, the most common mistake that most people make is that they deny the fact that they're even going to die. So that therein is the very, very first problem. As a society, it's something about America that we just don't want to see it. And so what happens is it actually is not your problem when it's your death, because you're not there to deal with the consequences. But this talk is a little bit more about what happens when it's your loved one and you have to deal with the consequences of them not having a will. My sister did not have a will. I don't blame her. I didn't have a will at the time either. So it could have been me, like it could have been me that my family had to deal with. But I really think that there's something about looking at being responsible for yourself and being responsible to your family by getting your affairs in order. I now have a will, but it took my sister's death to do it. I saw what my dad, who ended up doing most of the work, I refused to ever put him in that situation again. If something were to happen to me and he was still alive, I just couldn't do that to him. So what I want to cover first is the funeral industry. The funeral industry is pretty much about the same size as the wedding industry. Death care is a $15 billion a year industry. The wedding industry is $17 billion a year. So the commonality is a wedding and a funeral are both really big productions. And it's very easy to get carried away with adding elements on. Yes, we want the lilies, and we want the lilies everywhere, and the lilies suddenly cost $3,000. And the difference between planning a wedding and planning a funeral is that planning a wedding, you're not stressed. You're not grieving. You may be stressed, but you're not.
I was going to say.
But you're not stressed in the fact that your heart is being torn open and you're trying to just get up in the morning and breathe and just make it through the day. So it becomes so much easier, if it's possible, to try and plan ahead of time for your funeral or for your family's funeral, for members of your family. The thing about the funeral industry too, as I'm sure we've heard many, many times, is that there are some very unethical providers. There are some wonderful, wonderful people in the death care industry, and then there are some predatory ones. And the problem is you just don't know which one you're going to encounter. And trust me, you will not be in the right mind to be able to discern one from the other. So according to the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, a funeral is the third largest expense most families will have in a lifetime after a home and a car. And the fact that nobody plans for such an exorbitant expense is what makes it more and more expensive. So pointing out that when you're grieving, it's pretty much the worst time to make any decision. But that is exactly what happens if you haven't planned ahead. So ideally, you plan ahead and you make these decisions when you're well, when you're happy, when things are good. But if that doesn't happen and you have to deal with, like, boom, somebody just died and it's somebody that you love dearly, and you haven't had any time to think about any sorts of, or even have a conversation about what to do, there are several tips, I think, that will help you lessen your vulnerability. One is to, if possible, appoint an advocate. Appoint a trusted friend, perhaps a clergy member, or somebody who is a little bit more removed from your situation, because it gets really, really emotional, especially when you have family members come in, because we all know family has the most, there are deep-seated dynamics that tend to surface, and all sorts of things can go wrong, or they can make a difficult time even more difficult. So ideally you can appoint somebody who can actually help you and not be as emotionally invested. They can be the person that talks with the funeral home. You can tell them, okay, here's our budget. Our budget is $5,000. And that person, that advocate, can go out and just navigate and negotiate the interaction. Because if you're trying to do, when you're torn apart by grief, that's not the time for you to be comparison shopping and negotiating. It's just not going to happen. The other thing is to be aware of is emotional overspending happens constantly. And something to remember is that the amount you spend on funeral expenses will never equal the amount you have loved or treasured your loved one, ever. There's no price tag on how much you love someone. So you will not right any wrongs by splurging on a lavish casket or a service for your loved one. You will never be able to alleviate any guilt or anything, for things that weren't said, things that went unresolved. You will never, ever, ever be able to spend enough money to do that. So be aware of that, that this isn't the time or place to fix problems. And also, it's not the time or place. You'll never be able to pay enough money to show your love for someone, ever. Knowing this, the Funeral Trade Commission, again, the FTC, realized that consumers were really losing a great deal of money by going through the death care industry, and so they came up with something called the Funeral Rule. And it's a comprehensive list of rules and regulations that funeral and memorial service providers must adhere to under penalty of law. The purpose of it is to provide pricing transparency for consumers who have the right to ask for everything in writing, and they are also allowed. They must be presented with a general price list as well as a casket and outer burial container price list. What happens a lot is in a funeral home is the cheaper caskets will not be shown at all. So you have to find them on the price list. So if you have if you're looking to spend $2,000, for example, and you just see that when you're walking around in the showroom, everything starts at $4,000, you have the right to take a look at the price list and say, I want to see this one that says this one's $1,000. And there's a whole thing. There are funeral event seminars that are dedicated to the presentation of caskets, the way in which you are walked around, how you are shown different casket options. There's a reason for this. Industry studies show that the average person shopping for a casket buys one of the first 3 models shown, generally the middle priced of the 3. Therefore, it is in the funeral provider's best interest to show customers the higher end models first. And then to make a casket look less expensive, it can be placed next to a much pricier one. Sure, it's less expensive, but only in comparison. Higher end caskets will usually be organized to the right of the funeral home. 85% of people are right-handed and will tend toward the right, with cheaper caskets to the left. And also another trick of the trade is to put the budget caskets, they'll put really sort of derogatory descriptors on these items. They'll be put, if they are on display at all, they'll be put in like a poorly lit basement, or that makes you just feel like, I love my mom, I can't put her in this horrible tiny just ghetto casket, and that's, there is a reason for this. So just know this. Again, there are some lovely, wonderful funeral providers, but then there are some predatory ones. Just saying, these are very, very common sales tactics that are used. Another sales tactic that's used often is, or at least just sort of a warning, is don't mistake kindness for trustworthiness. It is the funeral provider's job to be respectful, reserved, and professional. However, this person is not your friend. He or she is not your counselor. He or she is not the person that you should be turning to for advice. They should be providing you with a respectful interaction, but it's business. It's not your friend. But it's very easy when somebody's kind and you're devastated to assume this person has my best interests at heart. Now, it's business. This is a business transaction. This is not a therapy session. So that's just something to be aware of. Preying on guilt and grief is very common. Watch for manipulative and coercive phrases that are chosen to play on a mourner's grief and guilt. Phrases such as, "This will be your final gift to your loved one. I'm sure you will only want the best for your loved one." This, indicating a more expensive casket or service, is the more respectful way to show, to say goodbye. Or, "Since your loved one was so wonderful, so accomplished, beautiful, beloved, gracious, wouldn't you want to have a funeral or a service or a casket that reflects that?" So, well, of course you do, but what happens is that's more money, more money, more money, more money, more money. So, and also be aware of disparaging or derogatory language used to describe any sort of item or a service. Things like welfare casket, morgue box, stamping the words temporary container not suitable for long-term storage on a cheaper urn. It happens. So, which again, it keeps playing on, here you are, you're devastated, you're brokenhearted. Of course you want the best for your loved one. And to be honest, if you have an urn, if you have ashes, you could go to TJ Maxx and buy a vase and put them in there. So you don't have to go and spend $400, $500 on a fancy urn. Not saying that that's what you need or want to do, but I'm just saying, pointing that out. Their remains, they don't need any special container other than something that's going to contain them. So another term that's used often is the term traditional. Anytime you're told an item, service, practice, or accoutrement is traditional, you should understand that traditional actually means optional. So it's not required. For example, you may be told that it's traditional to have 6 wreaths surrounding the coffin. The number of wreaths is arbitrary. You may choose to have 1 wreath or none at all. I constantly come back to the point you should always do what's right for you and your family. If you have $20,000 to spend on a great funeral, enjoy, do it. But a lot of people don't, and $20,000 is kind of an epic amount of money when you look at the other. That's a year of college tuition, that's a down payment on a house, that's a car. And I'm not saying don't spend money on a funeral, I'm just saying spend the money that's right for your family. Don't let somebody else dictate to you what's right for you. You have to keep remembering that, like, this is your experience, this is your loved one, this is your family. You're 100% entitled and allowed to go home, take a break from the funeral home. Just say, you know what, we need to go talk about this. We're gonna go and have coffee for an hour. People are gonna try and make you make decisions right away. You don't need to make a decision right away. You wanna do it in the privacy of your own family, of this is what's right for us. And you should not be made to feel badly about, if you can't afford an expensive funeral, that's okay. Most people can't. So you have options. That's what I just want people to know and remember, that you do not have to do anything unless it's mandated by the state. You do not have to do anything that is presented to you. It's your choice. What works best for you, what honors your family and what honors your loved one. So with that said, with the funeral, again, lovely people in the death industry, but also unsavory people as well. So you just don't know. It's easier to do this ahead of time, but that's, hey, in an ideal world, a lot of things would be different. So I want to get to legalese, because this is a very confusing aspect, and I'm a big fan of okay, what do I need to know? I don't want to read a book on probate. I just need to know what I need to know about it. I cannot get through an entire book when I'm grieving. It's not going to happen. So the easiest explanation of probate ever is, probate is the manner and method in which the estate of the deceased is processed through the legal system. Period. Probate is the manner and method in which the estate of the deceased is processed through the legal system. So an estate is defined as all belongings, assets, and debts. The function of probate is to settle debts owed and transfer remaining assets to beneficiaries. That's my version of a book. So just so you know, all estates must go through probate regardless of the presence or absence of a will. The difference will be how the estate is dispersed. If there is a will, it is deemed valid and binding. If there is a will and it is deemed valid and binding, which is in most cases, the estate will be distributed according to the deceased wishes. If there is not a will or is deemed invalid, the estate will be distributed according to the laws of the state. Probate is done per state in the United States, so there is no federal oversight of probate. It's done per state, which means it's different in every state, which means you really, really, really need to consult a probate lawyer. The point of a will is to guarantee that your assets and belongings will go to the people and entities you want it to go to. If you think that your family will just figure it out on your own, you're gravely mistaken. My grandfather did not leave a will, and he left 3 children and his second wife fighting over money. They're very close. It was a very difficult situation for all of them. And it's kind of unless you don't care for your family, you just want to create a lot of chaos, then definitely don't leave a will. That's a good way to stick it to them at the end. So what happens on the flip side, if you don't leave a will, is that suddenly somebody's stuck holding the bag. In our situation, it was my dad. He had to, because he didn't have the legal paperwork in place, he had to fight with all sorts of companies and cell phone providers, and because even though he was truly the next of kin, he did not have the legal paperwork in place that would allow him to just say, close the account. That's as easy as it is. If you have a binding will and you are the personal representative, you can just simply hand over the paperwork that the court gives you and you say, close this account, close this account. So, which brings me to testate. If somebody dies with a properly signed, witnessed, and current will, your loved one is said to have died testate. Your loved one's estate will then go to the beneficiaries appointed, and the will must be entered into probate to be validated. That is hopefully the easiest way it goes. Intestate is if someone dies without a will or the will is deemed invalid, that person is said to have died intestate. His or her estate will then go to the lawful next of kin and settled according to the law of the state in which he or she resided. Much more trouble. In terms of what goes through probate, in general, all assets that are in the deceased's name alone will go through probate, such as bank accounts, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, vehicles, real estate, wages due, and commissions. If the deceased assets in different states or counties, such as real estate property, probate must be initiated in each county. In some instances, property in the same state may be addressed in the same probate filing, but state law varies, so be sure to consult an attorney. An attorney can be your best friend in this situation. I cannot overstate the importance of hiring someone who knows what they're doing, who knows the law. You can technically do all of this yourself in the same way that I could technically go and replace the transmission in my car, but I don't know a thing about it. And I could follow some YouTube videos and maybe some pointers, but I don't think it's going to get done as well as if I go to somebody who does this for a living, who knows the law. And it's like having an accountant. I don't want to keep up on tax laws. I don't care. What I like to do is at the end of the year, I hand my accountant my information and he does it because that's his expertise. And I happily pay him for it. So, okay, so going back to probate. What doesn't go through probate? An estate worth less than $50,000, which I'm going to go into a little bit more, because if you have an adult child who dies suddenly, who's maybe 24 years old, maybe 30, they may not have assets that are worth very much at all. So I will circle back to that in a minute. Another thing that doesn't go through probate, properly jointly owned and registered with the surviving spouse. Assets that are contained in a trust, assets that have a named beneficiary, such as a life insurance or a death benefit, employer pension, which will go to the named beneficiary. So if you have a 401k account and you don't have a beneficiary, which most of the time they require that you name someone, if you don't have it, then the 401k goes through the probate. If you do name a beneficiary, bypasses probate entirely, goes directly to the person that you wanted to go to. Best way to do it. The same thing with life insurance policies. Something that's important to know about estate and probate payment is an estate must pay the creditors and the outstanding debt first. Then they pay estate expenses and fees. Then the estate pays lawyer fees. And then at the very end, if there's anything left, that goes to the beneficiaries or the heirs. So if for some reason, if you are the personal representative of a will, and you decide to change that up, that order of expense payment, which will be given to you by a court. The court will say, you must pay these expenses from the estate in this order. If you decide to deviate from that and you say, you know what, I'm going to pay the heirs first, and then I'll pay the debts, you will then be personally held financially responsible for that money. If the debtors are saying, wait a minute, this person still owes me $30,000, you're on the hook for it. So that's not going to happen that often, but I don't know how much they actually tell you that when you're going through this process. And something just to note about personal representatives or an executor of the estate, most people I think will probably be putting their spouses or their parents as the, and possibly siblings, to be their personal representative of a will. After the experience that we went through, normally I would have assigned my dad the honor of doing that, and wow, I have changed that, and I've given it to one of his friends, because here's something to remember, that the person who is managing your estate has to make a lot of phone calls and fill out a lot of forms and say over and over and over again, my husband has died, I have to close his account. My husband has died, I have to close his account. My husband has died, I have to close his account. That can be devastating. So you might consider for your, and again, it's all personal preference, but that is the role of the personal representative, is to close accounts, you're going to be living this world for a while of, my husband has died, I need to close his accounts. So consider, in my circumstance, I decided instead, after seeing what my dad went through with my sister, I asked one of his best friends that I knew that he would trust very much if he could please be the executor on my estate, or the personal representative, because I didn't want my dad to have to do that again. He already did it with my sister, I don't want him to have to do it with me. So one more word about probate. People, I think, always think it's such a bad thing because it's it just seems scary, probate, like just overwhelming. There are some advantages to probate, and that is, if an estate has many potential outstanding debts, probate imposes a finite deadline for creditor claims, which is usually 4 months. After that time period passes, no one can lay claim to the estate. And probate is also useful when handling contentious and potentially litigious beneficiaries. So again, everybody has a different kind of family, everybody has a different kind of family dynamic, but maybe you're dealing with Uncle Roy, Uncle Roy spends a lot of time at the track, and you don't know what Uncle Roy is up to. Uncle Roy probably owes a lot of people a lot of money. Maybe you don't want to deal with all of Uncle Roy's debtors. So if you can put Uncle Roy's estate through probate, you get 4 months, and then after that, too bad. You can have Uncle Roy's gambling buddy saying, like, Uncle Roy owed me $20,000. You're like, sorry, 4 months has passed, probate's closed. Tough luck. And one more thing is a word of warning. Probate. What happens when somebody dies? You do have to put in a death notification or an obituary to the local paper that serves 2 purposes. One is to notify your friends and loved ones of this person's passing, and also hopefully you can honor that person's life. But secondly, it shows due diligence that you have made a fair effort to let people know that this person has passed. And what you don't include in the obituary, but it's sort of silently understood is if this person owes you money, you need to get in touch. Let's see. So I would like to go back to the estates worth less than $50,000, because especially in this day and age, all of our estates, I think, are kind of going down. And again, if you're dealing with a younger person, again, adult children are a perfect example. There's a special affidavit that if an estate is worth less than $50,000, and this number varies from state to state, so you definitely would want to consult an attorney, you can file for a small estate affidavit, and it's sometimes called an affidavit of collection of personal property, and you can bypass going through probate, which can be a huge benefit, because somebody like my sister, for example, did not have any assets. The idea of going through probate is kind of ridiculous, because to settle what? But the deal is, you have to agree that you must pay all the liens and debts And you must pay all liens and debts, but you don't have to go through the probation process, which is helpful. And then the only people that are allowed to file such affidavits, and this could happen, this happens if you don't have a will, and it can also happen if you do have a will. The person who has, like, if you do have a will, your personal representative can file this affidavit and not have to go through the whole rigmarole of the probate court. And if you don't have a will, then those who have legal standing, such as the surviving spouse or children or parent, are eligible to file this affidavit. So it has to be signed and sworn in the presence of a notary, and then it's filed with the probate court. So the affidavit can be presented to creditors directly to prove that the person listed is serving the interest of the estate. So if my dad had this, it would have been a lot easier. Now I'd like to move to common misperceptions about wills and legal paperwork. Power of attorney. This is one of the most common mistakes that people make, is they think that a power of attorney actually covers the person through death. It doesn't. The power of attorney is only valid when someone is alive. Death renders all guardianship and power of attorney documentation invalid. If a person held guardianship or power of attorney for the deceased, that person will not have the authority to act on the deceased's behalf in death. I've talked to a lot of friends that are about my age, and they're like, I'm okay, I've got power of attorney for my mom. I'm like, no, you're not. So, just a really good point. You need a power of attorney, but that isn't the same as a personal representative for a will or for actions. There are a million reasons people choose not to make a will. It's like, I'll get to it, it'll work itself out, I don't want to think about it. I can't even tell you how many friends I have that have children and do not have a will, and they don't have guardianship set up. It's a crazy world, we're all busy, it's all, we're all trying to do the best that we can. But my perspective is, choosing to not have a will is an active choice. So, I think the best thing that you can think of about a will is that not having a will puts a tremendous amount of pain and pressure on the loved ones left behind. That is the number one reason that you should do it. It's your one last final gift to your family, that you can at least leave them a nice clean paperwork notebook. Here's my life, it's gonna be okay. Instead of like just paper scattered everywhere and like good luck trying to figure it all out. Because it's really critical to understand that what the paperwork is for. It's really not about you. It's 100% about the people that you love most in this world, because they're the ones that have to deal with the fallout if you haven't prepared. I like to look at it like buying an insurance plan. You buy insurance for your home, your car, your health. A will is your insurance for your death. And just to sort of hit the point home, and not to be overly dramatic, but I'm just sharing this because it happens, and it happened to us. Because my sister did not have a will, and we did not have any of the necessary paperwork required to settle her accounts, and we had no idea where to go. We didn't know about the $50,000 small estate issue. So my dad just started calling places, and my dad started trying to close accounts. So this conversation between my dad and my sister's cell phone provider actually happened. But she's dead. I have her death certificate. I understand that, sir, but technically we need her to close the account. But she's dead. I'm her father. I can send you her death certificate. Sir, that's our policy. But that doesn't make any sense. She's dead. I understand that, sir, but she has to close the account herself. Fine, you can send her bill to the cemetery. So what happened, unfortunately, was that because accounts were not, my dad was not able or allowed to close many accounts, her accounts went to a collection agency. And then collection agencies started calling my parents' house night and day. Oh. And we had just lost her. So even though like logically you would think that can't happen, it does. And if we had, and I'm not blaming my sister at all, obviously, of course, she had no idea. I didn't have any idea. I didn't have a will at the time. But this is what can happen if this paperwork isn't in place. And if you don't have the paperwork in place, and again, maybe an adult child dies, hopefully you can maybe just get the small estate affidavit, but just know that these things, unless you have actual legal paperwork, aside from the death certificate, the legal paperwork required shows that the person that is handing that paperwork in is legally allowed and authorized to act on that person's behalf. So my advice moving forward was, as I started going through this, I realized like really what you need is put your house in order. And I know this is a group that is on the ball with this. But I would take it one step further. If you can organize all of your accounts, make a detailed list of accounts, passwords, logins, all relevant and personal and financial information, so that anybody can come in and pick up the pieces of your life with relative ease, that becomes much easier. Because, for example, say you get into a car accident, and thank God you're okay, but you are on traction and on morphine for 3 weeks straight. You are in no shape to handle any of your financial affairs at home. Now, within that 3-week period, suppose you have a credit card due, a phone bill due, a utility bill due, and your mortgage due. If you miss one, credit card agencies are waiting for this to happen. So the minute you miss a payment, your interest rates can skyrocket up to 33, 34%. So the idea of having your life where somebody could kind of pick up and like be like, okay, I know she's in the hospital, and let me just go and let me just make her payments for her for these next few weeks, alleviates a lot of problems. And that's something that if we knew my sister's accounts and passwords and information, we could have just gone in as her and closed the accounts. I mean, we still had to provide notification that she had died, but we could have done that afterwards. We could have gone in, logged in, paid off the balances, closed the accounts, and then provided a death certificate. Easy peasy. Instead, collection agencies. So as I was writing my book, I ended up also writing a workbook that covers all of these things of making an entire list. And mine is like a writable PDF, but whether you use my workbook, you use your own, just if you can think about like putting together like a little notebook, a book of your life that somebody could come in and help you with. If you get sick, if you get into an accident, you get stuck, there's a that volcano that happened in Sweden or wherever it was, however many years ago. You get stuck in another country and you don't have access to your bills. Can somebody come in and at least just pay them? So, and it's kind of a pain to do all of it, but once it's done, which is, I think, a huge relief. And then, let's see. I wanted to cover just a couple of things about bank accounts and credit cards that people are often not aware of. For bank accounts, it is customary for banks to freeze bank accounts upon the notice of a person's death. So Surviving family members will need to file the death certificate and update the account before the funds can be transferred. Now, if the bank account is frozen and it's going to have to go through probate if it's just in that one person's name. Say you're married and your husband makes all of the house payments from his single account. You will need to, you won't have access to it. And you'll get it eventually, but you may miss a great deal of your mortgage payments, which then puts you in trouble with the bank and increases your interest rates. So something to think about is if you share a bank account, or if you know that there's somebody that could come in and take over these payments, like say you want to keep the house, put two people on the bank account, and then that account does not get frozen. So for example, a friend of mine, we were just talking about this, and her mother is going to put my friend on the mother's bank account in case something happens. She wants her to have easy access to money, to be able to pay for the house, pay for the car, make sure that everything kind of continues to run smoothly. In some states, joint accounts can be frozen, but it's more likely that they won't be. But this may be true too for if you have kids in college and perhaps you share a bank account with them, and that bank account is paying for their college tuition or it's paying for their rent. You want to make sure that everything isn't just contained into just your bank account if there are other responsibilities that the bank account fulfills. If the deceased named a beneficiary to receive the accounts in the event of death, and that's called payable on death or transfer on death, the money should automatically transfer to the beneficiary and does not, key point, have to go through probate. You will likely have to file paperwork with the bank to confirm the transfer. As far as investments, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, etc., you will have to contact the advisor or investment company to notify them of your loved one's passing. You will be having to provide a death certificate countless times, so you'd want to get 25 to 30 copies from the funeral home. The investment advisor will need to register the death and update the name on the account. If it's in that person's name alone, it has to go through probate. If it's shared or there's actually a beneficiary, it bypasses probate and goes directly to that beneficiary. And then with credit cards, I bring this up with my conversation a little bit earlier about my sister's credit card accounts. Credit card companies can be vicious and relentless, and they have the money to do it. Citibank has $1 gazillion. Or maybe I shouldn't have said that, but big banks, who knows, I don't know. Citibank might be wonderful and lovely, but credit card companies have a lot of money and a lot of resources, and they are 100% invested in getting all of their money back. So if your loved one died with, say, $10,000, $30,000 in debt, that credit card company is going to come after your family like there's no tomorrow. And something that you must know is that surviving family members or heirs are not responsible for the debt. They're going to try and tell you that you are. They're going to try and break you down. Unless your name is on the credit card account, you are absolutely not responsible for the account, period. And they'll come at you and they'll call you and send you letters and be threatening and try to make it seem as if you must owe this money. You don't. If your name is on the bill, yes you do. But if you do not have any tie to that, with the credit card companies calling my parents are not responsible for my sister's debt. Their names were not on the card. but they kept trying and trying and trying to get it, because basically what they'll try and do is just get money wherever they possibly can. And most people, because they're grieving and are not thinking straight, will just go ahead and start paying these things. And so you really need to know that you have rights, and I don't know of anything that you can do to get them to stop calling, but basically the only thing that you could do is send in a notification of the person's death and file a death notice, and hopefully they'll stop. Some places are really reputable and nice, and other places are not. You will need to notify 3 different credit card bureaus, and once you do that, one is Equifax, the other is Experian, the third is TransUnion. These are the 3 credit card bureaus that you can obtain your credit card score from just in any given day. But basically what you want to do is just mail them each a copy of the death certificate and say this person has passed. And lastly, claiming life insurance benefits or any type of benefits, you want to, if you're named as a beneficiary or recipient of benefits on life insurance, you need to take a few steps in order to secure the money that is rightfully yours. One thing that happens a lot is people have life insurance policies, but they don't tell anyone about them. So there are millions of dollars of unclaimed life insurance benefits that just sit there and pile up because Uncle Joe never said that he had all of his life insurance policies in the shoebox in the closet. And a lot of times people, going through everything, you're just like, I don't know, just, throw stuff away, and you don't realize that there are actually a lot of, there's a lot of money that's available, but nobody knows about it. So once again, I go back to that workbook of your life of if you have an insurance policy, list it. If you have, list the contact information, where is it, how much is it, how do you get a hold of the person that, or how do you get hold of the company that holds it? If you have a storage locker of treasured heirloom antiques, make sure people know about it, because this happens a great deal, that things get lost because no one knows. So as far as claiming insurance, the first thing you have to do is provide a certified copy of the death certificate, which you're just going to do all the time, which is, again, why you want 25 to 30 copies. And some companies will make an issue over the manner of death. Sometimes you don't get paid, for example, if it's a suicide, or sometimes if the death is pending, the insurance claim will then also be pending. And then the insurance company eventually will pay the proceeds of the policy to the persons named as beneficiary. And you will usually have several options of how it's distributed, kind of like the lottery. All in one lump sum, or do you want it spaced out over a period of time? And that's something that I would recommend speaking to a lawyer about, speaking to an accountant, just in case there are any tax ramifications for claiming X amount of money in X year. It's always smart to work with a lawyer. And yeah, just make sure that your family, that everybody knows what insurance policies are out there. Some have policies through employers, some have policies through guilds that they belong to, or unions that are often overlooked. And that, I would say, is the conclusion. So if anybody has any, there's so many things to cover, so I tried to do my best.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Sure, okay. You want?
If a person dies, either with or without a will, and nobody steps forward, whether or not they have significant money or not, in their estate, if nobody steps forward, what happens? I'm guessing that if the person is poor, there's somebody in the county that you call and the government takes over. If you have a large estate and nobody steps forward, even if there's heirs, what, the government still takes over and then the heirs just deal with how it turns out. Is that correct?
The question is if somebody dies and there was or was not a will and nobody steps forward, then what happens? I'm not sure. I mean, technically, it goes to the probate court because if somebody does not have a will, for example, the probate court will name a personal representative for the estate. So they will make an effort to find the legal next of kin, because for probate, if you there is a agreed upon list of next of kin of first surviving change. It's different in different states, but for the most part, it's surviving spouse, children, parents, and then siblings. It kind of goes in that order. So then the court would make an effort to find those people.
Do those people have to be the representative? Or they?
Well, here's what happens when you don't have a will. Somebody gets stuck with being the personal representative, and that person is appointed by the probate court. So it's sort of like tough luck of like, you're going to have to do it.
Well, what if the person won't do it?
I don't know. I mean, it's a legal issue. I don't know. I don't know, but it is. I mean, you're dealing with the law, so I'm not sure if you. I mean, I'm sure there's probably circumstances that you could turn it down, but.
The court appoints a lawyer, and the lawyer bills the state.
The answer, he said, was that the court appoints the lawyer and the lawyer bills the state. So it becomes, somebody has to do with it. It has to deal with it. It ends up just being like, nobody can just completely walk away. Someone's going to handle it.
First of all, thank you for an excellent presentation. And just to comment on death certificates, the funeral home will take care of them. The first one costs $20 and any copies cost $13. And the reason I mention it is the funeral home may charge you for getting the death certificates, which after the first one you can get from the Secretary of State. And the reason I mention that is most of the financial organizations want an original copy, but some of them will take the original copy, provided, make a copy and then give you back the original. That's up to them. But that'll save you $13, and that makes a difference if you're contacting 50 organizations.
That's true, yes. He was saying that the funeral homes do provide death certificates, and trying to get additional copies costs $13. You can also, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's in my book, there's a specific website where you can go and request additional copies of the death certificate. Usually the funeral homes are really accommodating with this because, they do this all the time, and they know that here you're going to need to do X, Y, they know that it's going to take that many, and so they always will recommend doing that many, but you can always get additional ones from the state. Yes?
Well, I would like to add to your practical suggestions. When I started calling insurance companies, pensions, and everything, I kept a journal because you will never get the same person twice. So I wrote down the date, who I spoke to, what they said. And then when you call back again and again, you say, I spoke to Shirley on this date, this is what she said. Get their extension numbers if they have a number, or a number of identification, as an employee. And that saved me, after I realized that, just saved me aggravation in hours. So keep a journal of who you speak to every time.
The comment was that to keep a journal of every time you're calling and trying to get your benefits, whether it's insurance or employee benefits or pension benefits, to keep a journal because you never talk to the same person twice, and make sure that you get confirmation numbers from your conversations. Try and get things in writing. Insurance companies as a whole, I think we can all pretty much agree, they do not make, it's not user friendly. So there's a lot of, again, this is just my opinion, but they do not make things easy, and it's kind of in their best interest to not pay out. Yes, go ahead.
If you have a trust drawn up in another state, how does Colorado honor trusts that have been set up in other states that, you know, we have our wills set up and everything, and we only have one child, so there's not any fighting going on there. A very small family. How does Colorado honor trust agreements pretty much?
I don't know specifically, but I think that any sort of, if you have a trust, that's a legally binding document. So, you know, you can't like take that across the border into, you know, Nevada, and Nevada says, we've never even, no, so it will be binding. It's just that what your child would have to do, like in terms of filing the probate, they would have to file, well, if everything is in the trust, that doesn't go through probate, but if there's anything that does have to go through probate, your child would have to do it in the county in which you resided.
Well, I have, my mother's passed away, and I've gotten my father to add my name to his bank account and also to his house. And now, if I understand correctly, you're saying it probably wouldn't be a good idea for me to put my name on his credit card.
No.
Okay. And are there any other places where I should put my name to help?
I think the bank account in the house is you know, putting your, the question was that her father has put her on his house and has put her on his bank account, and should she have him put her name on his credit card? So I said no. I can't think of anything, but then again, that's also like, that's a great lawyer question. Estate planners, they can help guide you, you know, your car actually would be really helpful, because then all you have to do is just say, okay, you know, you go into the DMV and you just get a transfer of the title.
I mean, no, but both are names. So, again, how do I put my name on his car? So we have both names.
At the DMV.
Let me just interrupt to make a couple of announcements. The books in the back are $15, so if you would make...
There are none left.
Oh, I yeah, I have more.
Where are they?
Oh, they're in the box. Like,
So the books are in the box underneath there, but if you're taking a book, please leave a check for Amy Levine for $15. And the second thing is, I would ask Amy to repeat the questions for our recording.
Is all this information that you've given in the book? And
yes.
how's the workbook provided? Can you buy that, or do you download that on the...
Okay, the question is all of the information that I talked about today available in the book? Yes, and then so much more. And the workbook that I talked about is, it's a downloadable PDF, and you can go to my website and you can download it there, and you can write on it and update it and send it to whoever you need to send it to.
So there isn't one here we can buy on the website?
No, because it's a downloadable PDF, so there's not really a way for me to sell that. Like, and then the book is also available on Amazon.
And I have one more. A personal representative, how much work, I suppose that's a really abstract question, but how much work is there? Because that's a big thing to ask somebody to do.
Yes, it is. How much work is involved with being a personal representative is the question. There's a great deal of work depending on, it depends on the state of the estate. Basically, I actually have a, let me just read you the responsibilities of a personal representative. It's not an easy task. They will actually, you can get an administrative fee for this job. because it is a job. And some people initially will say, "Oh, I don't want the fee." You do want the fee because it costs money, it costs time to go through all of this.
Do you give the difference between a power of attorney and a personal representative?
Yes. Yes, they are two different things. Is the personal representative different than a power of attorney? Absolutely, 100% yes. A personal representative is the person who is the executor, which is sort of the old term, of the will. Power of attorney, and the personal representative steps in after someone has passed. A power of attorney will act for somebody while they were alive. So in case, for example, you have a child who is sick and you need to make medical decisions and that child is 30 years old. You are then, if you have the power of attorney, you can go ahead and pay that child's credit cards, you can make legal decisions for that child.
Don't you have to be additional medical power of attorney, or is just power of attorney?
Power of attorney and durable medical power of attorney are two separate things. Power of attorney covers more of the financial and legal aspects. Medical deals, a durable medical directive gives a certain person, you say ahead of time, these are the ways in which I want to be treated in case I'm sick. And
You need that too.
so you need both. Yes?
Could you speak a little bit about the home funeral option, since you went into the funeral industry option?
I don't know a great deal about the home funeral options. There's a really lovely group in Boulder called Natural Transitions, and it's sort of a growing movement. I didn't spend a great deal of time on it. I gave some resources and links in my book to find out a little bit more about it, but basically it's sort of going back to when people were allowed to bring their loved ones home and care for them at home and wash and bathe them and prepare them and bury them on their own terms.
Well, when you say we're allowed, we're still allowed in most states. So that's the big misconception, is that people think they must use a funeral home.
No, you don't.
If you don't want to use a funeral home, you need to know that it is possible to be your own funeral director and have a home funeral, which I know is in your book bit, and you gave some links.
Yes. So she was saying that it is that you do not have to have a funeral home to do a funeral, that you can be your own funeral director. I do not have any expertise on this at all, so I would point you to, and at least in Boulder, Natural Transitions is a really great resource. They have, or at least if nothing else, it's a starting point. And it allows a different sort of funeral experience or end-of-life experience.
To follow up on that, if a funeral home's not involved, where do you get the copies of death certificate?
That's a good question. The question is, well, you can always get death certificates from, I don't remember the link off the top of my head because it's in here, but that would definitely be a question for if you're using a natural or green funeral or alternative funeral service, that would be a question for them.
Actually, you can get blank copies of the death certificate. It must be signed by a physician, but you can fill out the death certificate yourself if you're the funeral director, if you're doing a home funeral. And there is on another website for crossings, there is a downloadable PDF that gives you step-by-step instructions how to fill out the death certificate, which must be signed by a physician in every state, but you can fill it out yourself.
Could you repeat that? Could you repeat that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was. Okay. So to return to your question, though, about the responsibilities of the personal representative, I'll just read a list of what it is. Obtain the deceased will, find and list the deceased assets, pay outstanding debts of the deceased estate, pay applicable taxes for the deceased, have assets appraised if applicable, coordinate items for estate sale or brokerage if applicable, collect money owed the estate, close the deceased accounts, enter estate into probate if applicable, distribute your remaining assets to beneficiaries, safeguard the deceased property until it can be dispersed to the named beneficiaries, which includes the home, car, possessions, and valuables.
So why don't we take one more question?
Okay.
And then wrap it up.
Yes.
Yes, you can be named as an executor and not even know it until the time of death.
Yes.
But my point being that you can get someone at the court that will help you charge for the time for a barrister, okay?
Okay, so the comment was you can be named unbeknownst to you as the executor or personal representative of a will, which happens. And if that happens, you can go to the probate court and you can find, there are people called probate attorneys, and they will, for a fee, take the estate over, or at least maybe even just help you if you just want to hire them for legal expertise. But yes, that happens, and it's kind of not very nice to spring on people, so it's definitely something you would want to tell someone about. But their lawyers are always available, and they actually, on my website, I have a downloadable PDF that's free. It's just what to bring to a lawyer, and it will help you. It's sort of like with an accountant. If you just throw a bunch of receipts in a box and you bring it to an accountant and you say, here, figure out my stuff, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Whereas if you can just organize everything and get everything in place and put everything together, that's going to save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in legal fees.
Can I just ask something? Amy, apparently I know one person wanted 4 copies of your book. There may be other people who want copies. Could I just get a show of hands of people who would like to get a copy? Maybe Amy could have us have books here for the next time if you want.
Or can you buy them at
You can actually buy them on Amazon, and you can also buy them on my website.
What is that website? On her card, right?
The website's on my card that's at the front, but just it's called lastchapterconcierge.com.
The cards are right on the table, but there may be, if there are some of you who, like one person just said, I don't have a computer, I'm sure we can figure out some way that we get your information, Amy can mail you copies,
Sure.
or bring them here or something. Okay. The workbook?
The workbook is, it's only a downloadable, writable PDF, so it has to be ordered online. And it's on my website.
All righty, thank you very much.
Sure.
So at this point, if there are no further questions, I'll adjourn this meeting and just remind you that our next meeting is going to be September 14th, which is a Saturday, right here at 10 o'clock. And we're going to have Roland Halpern speaking on a completely different topic. He's going to be talking about end-of-life issues around the United States.
He's a good speaker.
Great speaker. Thank you. Feel free to